Now, my name is James on a Hill. Welcome to the channel. And here we talk about games and books that I enjoy. And we talk about the immersion and the escapism that I find within these worlds. And today's book is The Witcher: The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. So, what's the story about? The Witcher is based on a character called Geralt of Rivia, who is called a Witcher, and he is a monster killer. He's a trained monster killer, and he gets paid to kill monsters in different villages and stuff. And it's really interesting because that's really what a narrative is. It's not like Lord of the Rings where there's a ring to be destroyed. It's not like Harry Potter where there's some young fella in school getting absolutely terrorized by some baldy boy. It's not like Star Wars. What is the narrative of Star Wars actually? I actually don't know. Um, but yes, the book follows three characters. You've got Geralt the Witcher, and then you've got Dandelion, who is sort of like a busker on the street. Now he basically plays the lute and he sings and writes poems about events that is going on in the world. And he is in the story he finds himself in companionship with Geralt, and both of them become friends and just sort of travel parts of the world where Geralt is off trying to kill monsters and Dandelion is basically like a news reporter. He's just at the side, just trying to find and sing and write about the gossip that he's seeing. Um, Dandelion says it in the book. He wants to be where the action is. Um, and them two have a great sort of relationship and great chemistry, which I'm going to talk about in the section of what I like about the book. But yeah, that's basically what the story's about. Um, so I'm going to be talking about what I like about the book and what I dislike about the book, and what I my conclusion, and what I would if I would recommend it, and sort of what I found useful tools to help me read the book, and what my plans are going forward with the series. So with that, I really love the characters. Dandelion is hilarious. He's just he's a rascal. He's just really like annoying and frustrating, but really funny at the same time. And he really gets on Geralt's nerves. And sometimes you can be looking through the eyes of Geralt when you're reading the pages and thinking to yourself, going, "Oh my God, he's so annoying. He's a real wind-up merchant. What's he doing? He needs a slap." And then other times you're like looking through the eyes of Dandelion and you're like, "Oh, Geralt's a real bore. Like he's so frustrating. He's so like, ugh, depressing." And the chemistry between them two characters I really loved. And the third character in the book is Yennefer of Eggenberg, and she is quite she's a real boss lady. She's real like um real empowered sorceress who um has her own agendas within the story, and she sort of, as you can see in the book, she sort of doesn't really care about anybody. All she cares about is herself, and she's just trying to get through life in the most um she knows what she wants, and she actually says this in the book. She goes, "I always get what I want, girl," and she really does, and you see that at the end of the book. And yeah, so the characters are brilliant. Yeah, characters are brilliant. And next thing I want to talk about is the intensity of the book and sort of the pacing of the book, which I enjoyed. So the book starts off quite slow. It gets to like half of the book, half halfway through the book, you've sort of learned the characters. You have an idea of who the characters um, are. You know what their characteristics are like. You know, or sort of know what their agendas are. So then you go into the last section of the book with a bit more knowledge. And I found that the second last chapter or the third last, I can't exactly remember, but it gets really intense. Um, and that's where we meet Yennefer. And the section of the book with Yennefer is fantastic. It was kept me on the edge of my seat, and it sort of had me, you know, I couldn't get enough of it. It was just page after page after page, and then Owen actually was sleeping. A wee man was sleeping, and I was reading this part um, during his nap, and it literally had 2 pages left, and the wee man was crying upstairs, and I was just like, ah! So I had to put the book down, and it was on a cliffhanger for the rest of the day until I got to bed that night, and then I read the last 2 pages, and that was it. But that proves how gripping a book can be, and how the book can really get you. And Savosky's writing, how he draws you in with the development, character development, and then pushes the narrative to a point where you can't put it down. And that's definitely what I found near the end of the book, where I just couldn't put it down. The next thing I really enjoyed was the monsters, and not yeah the monsters and the sort of the bad, the evil or villain characters. Um, they're so grey. It's such a grey area where like they're so complicated. And talking about the characters with Yennefer, Yennefer's a very complicated character. And I'm hoping that as the series goes on, that I am exposed to the more complicated characters, and that we sort of that I can learn a bit more about their agendas and a bit more about why they are the way that they are. Because when you're looking at Yennefer's character, for example, who is quite all about herself, she's a sorceress, and from what we learn in the book, sorceresses are looked down upon, and some are prosecuted. And there's a lot of racism that happens in the background, and there's a lot of prejudice. And I'm hoping that as more as I read, that becomes more clear and apparent. But I love that about these characters and the monsters. They're judged upon, and not all the monsters are naturally evil. That there's a monster, for example, that is cursed. There's two characters that are cursed, and they once were human, but now they're um they've been turned into monsters. And you even as a reader, me as a reader, you judge that monster based on that, and not knowing the full depth of the story or the circumstances. So I really loved that about the book. What I didn't like about the book, I struggled with the pacing and the form of short story. Now, I got better with it as the book went on. I enjoyed it more as the book went on. I just found the first half of the book pacing was slow, and the second half of the book pacing picked up. I found that the form of short stories, that you would get into a certain story and you'd be really enjoying it, and you'd be, you know, um, really gelling with the characters, really understanding the setting, what world we were in, part of the world we were in, what and the narrative of that story, like, oh, I wonder what happens next, and then next thing you're pulled out of it and you're forced into a new story. There you go, there's a new story. So then you go through a process of relearning characters, relearning locations, relearning settings, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just not used to it, because most of the books I read is literally, you know, start to finish, start, middle, end, and yeah, you enjoy it for. It's easy. I suppose it's easier read that way, but with short stories, it's a bit more work. It's a bit more taxing on the reader, and I'm just very lazy that way. So it is what it is. The book as well is, I found it to be very dialogue heavy, and again another thing that I am not used to. I am used to third person descriptive writing about a plant being described over the course of 2 pages. That's because I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, and I most of my reading has been done um, in that world of Middle Earth. So whenever I'm reading books, I'm probably, to my detriment, I'm comparing with J.R.R. Tolkien's works. And a lot of people don't actually like that form of writing, but I do, because I can really sit in a world and immerse myself and embrace the world for what it is being described. Where with this, it's very dialogue heavy, so you're really in depth into the emotions of the characters, and you're really trying to figure out for yourself what are these characters like, and in the external world isn't so much described. Um, Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just something I'm not used to. Um, yeah, but that's pretty much what I didn't enjoy too much about the book. And it's funny because I'm saying I'm not enjoying it, but I actually have come around near the end of the book, and I've enjoyed it for more than it is. And to sort of summarize the parts I didn't dislike, um, I have come around to Savosky's writing style and what he's aiming to do. I think he's aiming the story and the characters and the way that he writes more towards somebody who has no knowledge of the story. I do, because I come from the games and the show. So I'm giving myself a bit of a buffer for that, or a bit of I'm giving it a wee bit of leeway over that. So my conclusion, I've concluded that I've really enjoyed this book. I'm really looking forward to getting on to the second book. I have read the first few pages of the second book, Sword of Destiny, and I'm really looking forward to just working my way through this series. Um, I've got over I've got over the fact that it's short stories, so I know what to expect going into the second book. I know what to look for, and what my conclusion would be of this book is it's a great book, um, and that you have, for me, if I was to reread it and if I was to tell you guys to read it, I would say read the story within the stories for that story and that story alone. That, that's a lot of words. I don't even know if that makes sense. But what I'm trying to say is, don't read it as a book, or try not to think of it as a book from start to finish. Pick the short story and read that short story. Let it sit with you and accept it for what that is, and think of it in a way of you're reading the experience that Geralt, Dandelion, and Yennefer are going through, not so much what is happening in this world and trying to figure out all what's happening, because you can't really get it from a dialogue heavy perspective, if that makes sort of sense. And I used an interactive map when reading throughout the chapters, because it helped me locate where they were. And yeah, and also another thing I did as well, I do this for most sort of fantasy books that I know I don't have a mental image of, is I sort of look up like artists' paintings about of characters and worlds. It helps me sort of put a mental image to the writing. Um, I would definitely recommend it, even if you're coming from the games or the series. It's definitely worth the read. It's short, snappy. You could have it read in a few days. And if I was to give this a rating, I would give it I'd give it an 8 out of 10. If I was asked that in the middle of the book, I'd probably give it a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10. That's quite harsh, but I just really struggled with the pacing. But now I definitely give it an 8, because it definitely made sense when I stuck with it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Really enjoyed it. Can't wait to read the next one. Can't wait to read more in the series. And yeah, thank you guys for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you stick around for more to come. Please hit the subscribe button, and I'm going to leave you with a quote by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is, "Fantasy is escapist, and that is its glory."